everyone. Welcome to Global Express. This is the new Indian Express's weekly video series on India and its neighborhood. Do click on the new Indian Express website and watch the episode. So as Prime Minister Narendra Modi heads home from the BRICS summit via Athens, his focus now on pulling off a successful G20, navigating India's position at Johannesburg cannot have been anything but tricky. The moon landing gave India a huge high, but an aggressive China packing BRICS with countries that will be beholden to Beijing, who could work with Xi Jinping to counterbalance the United States' domination of financial institutions, a kind of a China rebalancing of the power game, he is working to a plan. And he rubbed it in. He got VIP treatment, turning the BRICS summit into a state visit. He avoided speaking on China's economy, and he did have an interchange with Modi for a few minutes before they were seated at the event, which has now become a big story, where Modi has said that he indicated, he signaled he wanted a dialogue. Xi Jinping's foreign minister has said that it was all about, I mean, there was not even a word about disengagement or anything of that sort. So that does look very ominous. And I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. But also the other important news that has come out is that Vladimir Putin is not going to, the Russian president is not going to be attending the G20 summit, which India is putting a lot of effort behind. So I think this is the perfect moment for us to analyze India's strategy, not just over China's encirclement of India on our land and maritime boundaries, but I think further afield of the Middle East, which is our chief source of oil and energy, and home to a thriving Indian population, Indian diaspora, numbering over 10 million people. Modi has thrown his weight, particularly behind bringing Iran and Saudi Arabia and Egypt into BRICS. Yet it's China that has brokered the peace deal, however iffy, between Tehran and Riyadh. India has also backed Ethiopia and Argentina. But the sense I get, and the questions that I have, is: are we playing catch up? Before BRICS, Prime Minister Modi did have a conversation with the president of Iran, Dr. Saeed Ibrahim Raisi, to discuss Iran's induction into BRICS. He's dangled the carrot of Chabahar a number of times. What has also caught my attention this week is the quiet Iran-US prisoner swap deal that was brokered by Oman and Switzerland and Qatar. So let me start by introducing the two eminent guests we have on the panel today. Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad. He served as ambassador to Saudi Arabia twice, to the United Arab Emirates, to Kuwait, to Oman and Yemen. And he was in Baghdad when Indian workers were taken hostage. He now holds the Ram Sathe Chair for International Studies at Symbiosis International University in Pune, writes extensively. He's a byword on the region. He's written 3 books on West Asia, and I'm sure another one is on the way. Welcome, Ambassador.
Thank you.
And welcome Dr. Waiel Awwad. He's a veteran journalist who's covered wars in Jaffna and Kargil, Afghanistan and Iraq, where I still remember how in 2003, he and his team were kidnapped, but managed to escape. That's a story in itself. He was with Al Arabiya TV. He headed the Foreign Correspondents Club in Delhi, is a radio correspondent today, a founding member of various press clubs in Europe, and has won many awards, and speaks not just his native Arabic, but Hindi and Farsi as well. Welcome, Dr. Awwad.
Yeah, thank you so much. Thank you.
So let's start with you, Ambassador. Could you take us through India's ties with Iran, whether despite our long-standing bilateral links with Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the United Arab Emirates, as you have pointed out to me, are we being edged out by China? Have we been slow to react? Did China outmaneuver? Did they outthink us? And if you can go on to tell us about the expansion of Chabahar Port, which India sees as its link to Afghanistan, Central Asia, Eurasia. India wants to use it to link Chabahar to the international north-south transport corridor, move freight between India and Iran and Azerbaijan and Central Asia, and of course, Europe and Russia. So, would you take us through this? Are India's goals feasible? Is Iran committed to playing ball with India, or is it going to play us off against China?
You have asked whether India is playing catch up or there is some kind of competition between India and China in West Asia in general, and specifically with regard to Iran. My answer is that no, there is no such competition. India is not in the ring. India is not a player in the region in that sense, in the strategic sense. India should have been, it could have been, and many of us have argued about this. They have asked for India to play a significant role in promoting peace and stability in the region, but India's interests lie elsewhere. As far as Iran is concerned, for 20 years, India has subordinated its ties with Iran to its relations with the United States. And that has been the pattern, that pattern continues to this day. Look at Chabahar. So much talk about Chabahar. Chabahar was offered to us in 2003, exactly 20 years ago. At that time, there was a lot of bonhomie. It was said that we would develop Chabahar, we would have a location on the Indian Ocean at a very strategic point at the mouth of the Hormuz. We would have links with Afghanistan, links with Central Asia, and we would also have a connection with regard to the India North-South, in the international North-South transit corridor. Within 1 year, none of that happened. It was subordinated to the nuclear agreement. And then you had the phenomenon of Donald Trump unilaterally withdrew from the JCPOA, and India followed through. Not once did India convey to the United States that what you are doing is wrong, and as a result of your secondary sanction, our crucial strategic interests are being harmed. And
Why
then, of course, the Americans
why were we so careful about not upsetting America at that
because
point?
that is the way the foreign policy was planned in India. That we never. I am quite happy. I do believe that national interest. Every time when you took decision making, you take decision. You have to balance one against the other. I can even concede, for the sake of argument, that the nuclear agreement in its time may have been more important, and we could have kept Iranian relations on the back burner. Maybe. I'm not saying that we should have. I'm conceding for the sake of argument. But I cannot accept what happened in 2018, 2019. That was a travesty. This is a unilateral withdrawal from a solemn agreement, an agreement that has been enshrined in the UN Security Council resolution. This was an agreement which Iran had fully complied with. And yet it was subjected to the most onerous sanctions that have impoverished several million Iranians who were of middle class status. They are today impoverished because of the American unilateral action. What did we do? We reduced our oil imports to zero. Then we we had no stake. We could not join in any of the projects in Iran, energy projects or any other project. And Chabahar, nobody was willing to come into Chabahar because nobody was sure that they would be not subjected to American sanctions. Americans said you can come. So I would say to you, in general, India has shown no interest in playing a strategic role in West Asia. And number two, we have very seriously harmed our own national interest by subordinating our ties with Iran to the American interest.
But how has that changed, Talmiz? I mean, the sense you now have India reaching out to Ibrahim Raisi, and they had a conversation at BRICS, and he has offered a Chabahar. And from what I've read so far on Chabahar, the Indians are, taking it forward.
20 years later. No, let me be very clear. These conversations between our leaders have taken place several times in the last 5-6 years. The foreign minister has visited, the defense minister has visited, our prime minister has spoken, their foreign minister has come to India. I believe the Iranians have been pleading with us to show progress on Chabahar.
Oh my gosh.
And that's not happening. It's not happening. Because, and then of course, there is this other thing. There was to have been not only development of Chabahar, we were to have made a railway line. Indian Railways were to have made a railway line from Chabahar to the Afghan border. And there was no progress, so they have taken away that project and given it to the Chinese. We were supposed to develop a free trade zone, and there was no progress on that, and they've given that to the Chinese. So, there has been serious omission and a lackadaisical attitude on the part of our policymakers.
That's very interesting you say so. Things may be changing, Dr. Awwad, if I can turn to you. There's supposed to be a prisoner swap deal that has been arrived at earlier this month between the United States and Iran, where 5 Iranian origin prisoners holding US passports will be exchanged for Iranians being held in US prisons. And $6 billion frozen in a South Korean bank, which is basically, the money that Iran has made from selling crude, is going to be transferred to a bank in Qatar. What does this mean? That it clearly means that there is a deal that is being worked out in secret by Oman, Switzerland, and Qatar, and it could be the Iranian US prisoner swap deal, and the freeing of funds shows there's some change in the offing. Is the US signaling that it has not withdrawn from the region, or is it trying to go back? I mean, as Talmiz Ahmad said, sort of make amends for that very illogical, scrapping of the JCPOA.
Thank you very much. My greeting to you and to Ambassador Talmiz. I have been listening to him very carefully and interestingly, and I echo whatever he said in his remarks. And I would say that the American-Iranian talks have never stopped, Neena. It has been always there for years, even at the worst time of the crisis between the two countries. And the backdoor diplomacy have been playing, whether it is in Qatar, whether it is recently in Qatar, whether it is in Oman. But the Qataris have played the major role in this striking this deal, and I think the money will be released according to the American, and the swap have taken place, which is showing that the Biden administration also is looking for a way out of the crisis with the Iranian, because they have noticed that even using the maximum pressure on Iran does not lead to any yield any results. Actually, it made Iran more stronger. It made Iran more adamant to come to the table with the United States, and even to make it more regionally stronger in the Gulf region. So I think the American realized and recognized the best way to keep Iran is to contain or to stop the Iranian ambition of getting the uranium enriched more than 60% now, because the Iranian have crossed the threshold of 60%, where the American now may be thinking also of a deal to strike with the Iranians, some sort of a deal with the Biden administration, which has been on the talk for some time. So I think what we are witnessing is some of backdoor diplomacy, where the American are always, that is what the American does. They say something publicly, and the backdoor, they were trying to ease some of the tension. And that's despite the fact that they have the maximum number of American troops, whether it is in IDD in Qatar, whether it is in UAE, whether in Saudi Arabia. They have made their presence in the Gulf. And Talmiz Ahmad also knows very well that the American, after 1991, after the Second Gulf War, where the American have taken and established their military bases after removing Saddam Hussein also from liberating Kuwait. So I think the American, there are two crucial issues here we have to witness where would be the outcome of such kind of deal between the two countries. One is the forthcoming meeting of the IAEA, which has to take a soft stand on Iran, a bit of a soft stand. That means American somehow are agreeing to the Iranian point of view, because if you pull unilaterally from a deal, you don't expect you to come back to the same deal if you don't give me those guarantees, which the Iranian are asking the American to give. And the second one will be also the what you call the meeting in the General Assembly in the United Nations. If the president of Iran will be traveling to attend the General Assembly, then we may see some kind of easing the tension. But all of this depends. It's an Israeli-centric policy of the United States. In fact, it is only Israel lobby which is putting the pressure on the United States. If you look at the relation between US and Iran prior to the revolution, Islamic revolution, you will say that it was the dog or the guards of the American interest in the region. And in fact, American have shown quite interest in the commonality between the two countries in this region. But because of Israel angle, that's why the tension is there. And I think the Israelis are not happy But at the end of the day, they will have to accept the reality.
But Awad, does that mean there will be a change to the nuclear deal itself? I mean, in the sense the enrichment level and the fact that the sanctions that they faced all this time, will that be lifted? I mean, is that going to change?
I think gradually there will be some sort of lifting of the sanction. American will not ease at one time. It done because American going for an election next year, and I think the lobby will be very strong anti-Iranian lobby in the United
Yes,
States.
it's already started. The criticism has
So
already been made.
Yeah, that is exactly what it is. The point is, but I think there is some sort of an arrangement where even the New York Times have revealed in one of its articles about some secret deal with the United States. I think if the American realize that now Iran is a force to reckon with, I don't think they will be able to put more pressure or to not to let it go. That the Iranian has to have some sort of guarantee from any American administration, irrespective whether it's Biden or anybody comes after it.
Do you agree with that, Ambassador Talmiz Ahmad? I mean, do you think that there's going to be some kind of a shift in the US policy publicly towards Iran?
What we have to look at is what the Americans are up to and what the Iranians are up to. The Americans are anxious to have an arrangement with the Iranians in terms of which the Iranian nuclear enrichment program is capped. It is capped at 60%. And this discussions that have been going on, some say 1 year, some say 2 years, these have covered the following points. Sometime by the time you came to June, you already knew that an agreement was in the offing, and on 10th August, it was formally leaked that there is an agreement. The agreement, I shouldn't call it an agreement because it is not signed. It is an arrangement. It's an arrangement for mutual advantage. It has a certain, and nobody expects it to have a long-term time frame. You are in an election mode, and obviously the Americans are not going to be able to have an agreement that needs congressional approval. What is happening is a gentleman's agreement. The American, they have these Israelis have called it. They have called it a mini agreement. The Iranians have called it a political ceasefire.
Yeah.
And it means this: the Iranians will cap their enrichment at 60%. They will not carry out attacks on American contractors and military personnel in Iraq and Syria. They will also be cooperative with the IAEA. They will also release US prisoners, and you have seen progress in that regard, and they will not supply missiles to the Russians. In return, the Americans have promised they will not impose any new sanctions on the Iranians. There will be no seizing of tankers, which the Iranian tankers in the region. There will also be no new anti-Iran resolutions in the United Nations, and there will be the defreezing of accounts. This is crucial. What the Americans cannot do is to relax sanctions, because then it becomes a domestic issue. What they are actually agreeing to is to allow certain countries where Iranian assets have been frozen for several years to slowly ease that and allow those monies to go. And what Waiel Awwad has just mentioned, that the monies are already moving from South Korea into accounts in Qatar. So so what you will see, it's a very tenuous arrangement. It will barely last till the election. Much may happen after the election. We don't know. We don't know which way things will go. I think it's a bit exaggerated just now to say that there could be discussions on a much broader range of issues, because there are just too many things going wrong in the United States. It's a very deeply polarized country. Israel is a deeply polarized country. Both of them are looking at extreme right-wing elements. In the case of Israel, already in power, and you could have an extreme right-wing element making a surprise dash for the White House. So what you have just now is an interim arrangement to ensure that the economic, this will ensure that the nuclear matter does not get out of control, and some hotheads in the extreme right-wing government in Tel Aviv start looking at a military option. It may not happen, and I don't believe that there is that kind of propensity. But you have a government now in Tel Aviv that is absolutely maniacal. I mean, there is no modicum of any reality. There is no understanding or sympathy with regard to the Palestinian cause. And they have no understanding of what is the real politics in the region. Netanyahu has that understanding. But today he is pathetic. He's so
Yeah, he's got his
terrified
back to
of
the
being
wall.
arrested and jailed that he needs these wretched characters in his government. So,
Yeah.
yes, there is an arrangement. It is taking place. Already there are signals that it is making progress. There are already reports in the Israeli media that Iran has started de-enriching some of the
Yes.
material that it has, and that the quantum of enrichment has come down quite significantly. Number one. Number two, we have seen that the US, which used to have sanctions on the Iranian every week, they have not had any sanctions on the Iranians since June this year. So yes, there is progress over, and then of course there is a progress on the prisoners. So I think that you are looking at a kind of movement where on both sides there is a degree of satisfaction. For the Iranians, as far as the strategic scenario is concerned, much has changed already in the region. Iran has moved on, the US has moved on, the countries in the region have moved on. What
But
you
we are
find
still
now,
stuck. But
sorry,
have we moved on? Has India moved on?
India, see, you are keeping on asking me about India, and I have to answer you that India is not a serious player in the region.
I
India
agree,
doesn't
but
want to get involved with the region. India is not a player.
even today,
Even today more than any other occasion. See, look, let me clarify to you something. The region has asserted strategic autonomy. So you have seen how Saudi Arabia has played its cards. It asked China to arrange the brokerage. This is something India should have done. If you
yeah.
want to play a strategic role in a region, you must look at the region as a collective entity. But India's policies with regard to West Asia, and indeed I would say to you for most other regions in the world, is to have bilateral and transactional engagements. That has not changed. So in India, we look at Saudi Arabia, Iran, Israel, UAE, Qatar, all of them as separate entities. This does not allow us to play a strategic role.
That's
China has
fascinating.
always looked at West Asia in a collective sense. If you
Yeah.
remember the visit of President Xi Jinping in 2016, he has set up the China Arab dialogue. He looks at the region as a whole. The Belt
Yeah.
and Road looks at the region as a whole. So, you
Yeah.
see, don't bring in India. India has opted to sit out. Our interests are today overwhelmingly corporate in character. So, whatever was done by the political leadership, the door is open for the corporate sector to move in. And I think they are making merry even as we speak.
Dr. Awwad, if I can bring you in on this, I was also quite intrigued by the man who used to be Obama's chief negotiator and Joe Biden's chief negotiator, Robert Malley. Who is the one who is driving the U.S. Middle East policy today? And what is the impact that it's having, you think, on the Middle East itself? How is Israel not being able to meddle with US foreign policy in the Middle East?
I think that give you an indication there is a rift between Biden administration and Netanyahu government, because there are not only issues regarding to Iran, as Ambassador Talmiz was mentioning, there are issues relating to the Palestinian issue as well, and the policy of Israel inside the occupied territories, that it has been affecting the future of American relations in the Arab world. Having said that, I would also add to it, Neena, that the Gulf War, have also taught the people in that region so many lessons. And also the
The
Russia-Ukraine war,
1991 Gulf War
1991, the American invasion of Iraq, and then the
in
American military
2003.
bases and withdrawing from the region and leaving a vacuum in that place, filled up by Russia, filled up by the Chinese, and Indian are reluctant to play a proactive role. I fully agree with Ambassador Talmiz. But the issue of Ukraine, your Russia-Ukraine war also have also expedited the position of many of the Arab countries who felt that even their money is no more safe in the American bank. So even though the Iranian have also been at the receiving end of the American foreign policy, but they have been gaining a lot in the region. But the United States also teach us, and because their priority at the moment is China. So they wanted to ease the tension in this region temporarily because Iran is supporting Russia in this war with their drones, with their military, which have been changing the paradigm of the war in Ukraine. So the American wanted to give you some sort of incentive to the Iranian, while they wanted to continue with their policy of containment. So therefore, the Iranian understood the American plan. Therefore, you don't see any figure in the American administration who is really influential in dealing in the Iranian issue at the moment, because Iranian does not trust anybody in the American administration. So they are trying to play that card of not unknown faces to us, that they will be able, because Iran is no more discussing the issues of Iran-American relations based on an Amir who is sitting in the White House. It is based that they have to give me a commitment, non-negotiable, and you cannot change it. It has to be affirmative deal by any American administration who comes to the White House, does not change it, like what the Trump has done unilaterally. So I think these are the issues where it has to be taken in consideration, and the Americans are deeply in need of the Iranian at the moment, because Iran geopolitically is a very important country. For the north-south connection, you can see the corridor they created between Russia, Iran, and India. You can see the corridors they are trying to do with the Silk Road of Xi Jinping initiative, the Belt Road initiative. So therefore, there are so many issues happening in the Middle East where the Americans are seeing that they are, even the BRICS now, where the Iranian is joining the BRICS along with Saudi Arabia and UAE. Come on, these are the American allies. What are you going to do? So you can't just go and beat every country, each country which does not come to the American fold. So I think there has to be some sort of a changing in the American think tank, and the Israelis understand that they no more they can rely on the American of their getting their free hand against the Palestinian. Unless and until you solve the Palestinian issue, then you will not be able to deal with the Arab country, as you have to deal it, as the ambassador said, unified Arab cause. Because when it comes to Palestine, we are all united at the same cause. When it comes to the Arab cause, we are all together. So I think India has to have also a sort of rethinking to address this issue. And I wonder why we don't have advisor of West Asian affairs to the Indian government. I mean, there has to be some sort of an advisor back on the early 2000. Now we don't have it. Why? There has to be some sort of, you have the maximum revenue coming from this part of the world. You have the maximum stake in your food security and your oil security, and expats are living there. All these issues are of a vital importance for India. So it's not enough that I can crown you with the best award of this country, but I think these awards should be translated into a sort of action where India kept an equidistance with all the Arab countries in sort and keeping away from the problem. But now you have lots of things at stake, and you need to take step fast to really re-establish yourself as a regional player. Forget about the soft power issues now. It's a matter of security. It's a matter of future. It's a matter of strategy. Think it on those terms. Absolutely.
Yeah, I agree with you. In fact, this is why I believe that India has to have an advisor. I agree with you completely. We have one sitting on our panel. He would be fabulous as the advisor.
I think he's the best choice. If I'm given any.
If you are given any say, yes. Neither of us are given any say in these matters. So, Awwad, I want to go back to the US and UAE, which is another very important country in the matrix, in the Gulf matrix. Now, I believe that there was, obviously the UAE got very upset when Iran continued to seize commercial oil tankers in the Straits of Hormuz and blocked, I believe, picked up one which was on its way from Dubai to Fujairah. Has that changed? I mean, the sense that Iran then backed out of the U.S. Maritime Security Coalition this May, and is it possible that the UAE took too strong a stance? Because I mean, the US is allowing the oil tankers, Iranian oil tankers, to go to ply the waters again. That it doesn't seem to be any block. Again, it may be a gesture to win over Iran, but what do you say about the UAE's role in?
I, Nina, the thing is the free maritime freedom of navigations and all the United States is trying to sell to the rest of the world when it comes to China and the Asia Pacific. It does imply on even in any kind of a sea when it comes to the American interest. And that's what we see in the Pentagon, that the 21st century strategic plan for the Pentagon. So we understand the American policy in this region. Therefore, provoking a problem at the Persian Gulf is a part of American taking hegemony or taking control in that part of the world because they have lost the control. And it is Iranian have been telling the American and the rest of the world that it is the regional power, it is Iran who is responsible for safeguarding all these shipments. And any action done by the Iranian on against any ship in that part, remember, it is a retaliation action for an American or a British tanker or a British forces who have hijacked or take a hostage an Iranian tanker. So therefore, it's a tit for tat. That is how they are working on it. And Emirates will not take a step, to fight the Iranian at this stage, but they are willing to hear from the other side because they have a good relation at the moment. Even the Saudis are trying to rapprochement with the Iranian. So it has nothing to do regionally, in fact, with hijacking of any ship from these countries. It has to do more with the American influence, with the American pushing and pinching those countries to create some sort of, fishing in the troubled water.
No, and as both of you have said, that the American presence is huge. There's Al Udeid Air Base. I remember during the Gulf War, it was so amazing, and you had, I mean, the amount of F-16s that I saw there was quite a shock. And of course, but is Saudi Arabia now the other country which is a fascination to me is Saudi Arabia, because I know Talmiz Ahmad served there twice. You paved the ground for a remarkable visit to Saudi Arabia by our Foreign Minister Jaswant Singh. But there is talk also of a US engineered Saudi-Israeli normalization. I mean, given the ground reality, I mean, as both of you have have described, with the daily confrontation between the Israeli forces and the Palestinians, does that look likely? Does this mean the US is also trying to sort of strengthen its ties with Prince Mohammed bin Salman, the Crown Prince, who has refused to play ball on cutting down and limiting oil production, and kept OPEC basically, not from producing the oil that it should. I mean, Iran is up production, but whatever. But can we just look at about the rise of Saudi as a major sort of challenge to the US, really?
See,
they're no longer
the American absence of understanding of what is happening in West Asia is clearly affirmed by their completely misguided focus on putting pressure on the kingdom to normalize ties with Israel. This pressure on the kingdom is taking place just when Israel has become extremely right-wing, extremely violent with regard to the occupied territories and the Palestinian people, and has desecrated the Holy Mosque. They have deliberately desecrated Al-Aqsa by wandering through and taking soldiers and beating people, etc., worshippers. It is in this context that you find a completely idiotic approach of the Americans to tell the Saudis normalize ties. The Saudis would ask, what do I get in return? I ask a simple question to you. This pressure that they are putting on Riyadh, why don't they try that on the Netanyahu government? Even a fraction of this pressure on the Netanyahu government would reveal something. I have noticed that the right wing in Israel doesn't give a damn for the Americans. Therefore, what the Americans have shown to me, honestly, is a complete absence of any understanding of what is happening in the region. What is happening is every country in the region, including Israel, has asserted strategic autonomy. None of them has imposed sanctions on the Russians. Each of them is anxious to build up ties with the Russians on the one hand and with China on the other. That is happening. That is a reality. Multipolarity is not going to come. It's already there. Already there as a reality.
That's very important.
Just see what has happened. Saudi Arabia is anxious to join the SCO and is going to join BRICS. That means the most loyal Arab ally of the United States from 1945 today is fed up. It has decided we have come of age and our interests lie in engaging with different countries in the world. They don't buy the American insistence of a binary, of a new Cold War. They don't want to be pressurized into engaging with these Israelis. Those days are gone. Because they have seen over the last decade that the Americans do not actually function as credible security guarantors in the region.
Not
and
anymore.
that is why they are looking elsewhere. They look to China in order to bring these two neighbors together, Saudi Arabia and Iran. China doesn't talk up the military language. It doesn't have soldiers in the region. What it has is diplomacy, economic cooperation, investments, and joint ventures. That is the language China talks. It talks about connectivity. It talks about this, technology cooperation. Countries like that. Countries don't want war. They don't want confrontation. Look at the American record. From the first Gulf War, sanctions inspections regime, no-fly zone, harming the interests of Iraq and the Iranians. Babies were killed. 500,000 children in Iraq died. Then
Basra.
you go on and you do carpet bombing in Afghanistan, carpet bombing in Iraq. You have an occupation of 20 years, nothing to show for it. The people are not morons. They understand their interests. They've decided to move on. Not one country, except for the American allies, Australia, Japan, and Korea, not one Asian country, not one African country, and not one Latin American country is supporting the US agenda as far as the Ukraine war is concerned. Each and every country wants to engage with the Chinese and work with the Russians and see how their interests can be promoted.
So this US.
Can I just add
yes,
a point?
yes,
Neena, here?
I
agree with Ambassador Talmiz, and I think he was the first Indian to write about the rift between Saudi Arabia and UAE as well. I think that's a very important point. We have to take it in consideration because India have taken the wrong side. I don't know, some people look at it from the I2U2, where India have joined this United Arab Emirates and Israel into these sorts of a corridor, which is not seen as as a whole of an Arabism movement or unified Arab position. So the Saudis are trying to reestablish themselves in the region as a regional power, also to reckon with, and that's why they wanted to show themselves as a strong and open economy, where Mohammed bin Salman is trying to have a different vision of 2030 vision for his country. So I think these are the issues where the Saudis are trying to take a lead in the region, and I don't think the lead can take them directly to the door of Tel Aviv. That Tel Aviv doors are yet to be open, and I don't think the Saudis are in a hurry to do it, even with the American guarantees and all, because it will take time. But what interesting me is, because we are talking Iran in this issue, is the important that the American also may close their eyes for a nuclear ambitious Saudi Arabia in the future. So let's see how
that's very
develop in that
interesting.
region.
No, that's an extremely interesting point. The fact that they could look the other way if Saudi wants to turn nuclear. And the fact that the US is looking the other way where Iran is also concerned. That could be the second tripod. But I was also curious about the fact that the inherent contradiction between Shia Iran and Sunni Saudi Arabia still exists. I mean, despite this sort of rapprochement, so-called rapprochement, is that really a viable, sort of agreement going forward? What does it actually achieve? Because I mean,
I don't
in
think
Yemen,
the sectarian factor has been of any relevance whatsoever. This is something that has been blown out of all proportion. It is not significant. What is significant are strategic interests. Iran has posed a strategic challenge to the kingdom, which the kingdom attempted to balance with the help of the US, and then also with the help of Egypt, partnership with Egypt, etc. Over the last decade, and particularly during the Trump era, the Saudis concluded that no useful purpose is served in depending on the Americans. First, you had the Americans talking about the pivot to Asia.
Yeah.
Then, without consulting the GCC, they entered into the nuclear agreement with the Iranians. Then you had Donald Trump. While he talked the language of confrontation and conflict, in actual practice, he didn't do anything. You know, when you had the attacks on the Saudi oil facilities, he didn't do anything. By the time you come to 2020, then you have the run up to the elections. Biden abuses Saudi Arabia. He abuses the crown prince. I think at the end of 2020, the Saudis decided that this policy of confrontation and conflict is not good for us. And they opted for de-escalation and diplomacy. What was the result? January 2021, they removed the blockade on Qatar.
Yes.
Then from April 2021, they opened the dialogue with the Iranians. They start engaging with the Turks. And you find that the whole atmosphere starts changing. Americans are not involved. Saudis show interest in SCO, become a dialogue partner. They show interest in BRICS and they're going to join BRICS. When in July 2022, Biden visits Saudi Arabia after abusing them so much and pleads with the crown prince to increase production of oil, the crown prince told him to go home empty-handed, because importance of Gulf of OPEC Plus and the relationship with the Russians is more important for national interest, something the Americans have never valued, never understood, and never cared for. So you have this scenario of massive change taking place in the region. And it is on this basis that you find that today Iran and Saudi Arabia have normalized and have moved forward. Within 2 months, their embassies are functioning, high-level visits are being planned, economic cooperation is being discussed. None of this has anything to do with the business of Shia and Sunni. Don't buy this Western propaganda.
What about the Houthis? The Houthis continuing to be
the Houthis is a political issue pertaining to Yemen.
Yes.
The Saudis made the mistake of looking at them as Shia rather than as the original inhabitants and rulers of North Yemen. They have been there for 1,000 years. It is not their Zaidi character that is most important. In fact, the Zaidi community is closest to the Sunni. They follow only the first 5 imams. They did not have separate mosques even. And in any case, we know the Houthis were largely independent.
Yes.
They were not subservient to the Iranians. The relationship with Iran flourished after the war began.
So Iran basically used the Houthis to trouble Saudi.
What you have seen over 2021, various initiatives by the Saudi side to bring about a peace arrangement within Yemen. They are looking to the Iranians to help, but at the end of the day, they will need to work with the Houthis. You have to give Houthis, that is the Zaidi community, a place in their own country. You can't pretend they are not there. In North Yemen, they were 60%, but in United Yemen, they are 40%, but they are still an influential 40%. So you have to work with them. You cannot pretend. This sectarian approach to West Asian affairs has never worked and is not going to work in future either.
That's fantastic. That's really good to hear. Awwad, I just wanted to ask you. You were talking about the UAE. What is the UAE's biggest challenge now? Because as you said, I mean, it's broken with as Talmiz has written, this MBS versus MBZ. Mohammed bin Zayed, who was a very key ally during the first Gulf War of the Americans. I mean, I know he personally drove it.
I think the rift is already on the open, and even in the media in Saudi Arabia and UAE attacking each other, because now they are exposing, especially with the Yemen issues, where the Saudi felt that they have been betrayed and dragged into a war of not of their choice. Therefore, who sees
Oh.
war, or actually, if you look at the whole map, if we look at the wider perspective of the conflicts happening in whether it's in the Persian Gulf, whether it is in the Red Sea, you will see the sole beneficiaries of all these wars is the American military industry. And the American wanted to control all the trade, the global trade of oil and global trade passing from those countries, because if you have more war zone, you can sell more arms. And if you can also control those passage, you will have more insurance money to pay, and those countries will have to
But
share
where
lots
does
of
it
extra
leave?
money.
Where does it leave the United Arab Emirates?
Emirates is trying to find its position, and I think it has been trying very hard to establish itself as a leader in the Arab world, and many of the countries are not happy maybe with the UAE behavior in different Arab capitals. But at the end of the day, I think what the UAE has to settle is to settle its own house, especially with the Saudis, because we do not want to see any kind of a regional conflict between the two. They are still a part of the GCC. But I think even the UAE have realized that they are also maybe because of their internal setup is not yet fully seen as a cohesive kind of a leadership. They need some more time to see what could be the future like for them. And I think they're realizing that Yemen was a grave mistake, the war. And if they don't, because if you're controlling the Djibouti and you make a military, bridge from Djibouti to Aden, that's what the American wanted. But now they realize we are fighting wars for different countries. So why not to think of our own people and our own self? That's why you see the Russian war actually have exposed even the American equities or collateral guarantee they give for your money. So where these monies of the Saudis and UAE and the Gulf country in the American bank, will the Americans return a single penny? I don't think they will return a single penny. So looking east and acting east policy is of a major shift in the Gulf thinking of the future de-dollarization and depending on the new sources of their oil and gas, where they know that the market is meant for them is Asia.
Can we also look at the other rising power in the Middle East, Turkey, which with India, with Modi's visit to Greece, India has sort of signaled that it's not really comfortable with Turkey. What could be driving this? What is this wedge between Turkey and India? And Awwad, if you could come up on the fact on India's relationship with Syria under Bashar al-Assad, and Iran's control over Shia Iraq in the post-Saddam era, in Yemen, the Palestinian territories, and Iran's Al-Quds force, after the assassination of Qasem Soleimani. Does it, does Turkey still have an active role in the region, or is Syria still trying to push back?
Well, I think they have active role everywhere, from zero problem with neighbor to all the problem with the neighbors. Not only Syria, not only, their ambition to take it to a next part of Syria. In fact, they are already in the process of taking Idlib, north part of Syria. They are already having their Turkish school, Turkish money,
Yes.
and the currency, and they are supporting more than 55,000 terrorists. As per the United Nations figures, are still under their shelter of the Turk. So I think they're having a project, and Turkey project is bigger than Syria. It is even extended to Khorasan, is extended even to Kashmir, extended even to Uyghur in China. So the Ottoman de facto emperor or de facto Khalifa Erdogan feel that he is the one who can bring this ummah again under the Ottoman shield, where he is too much ambitious and he eating more than he can digest. So therefore, he's taking advantage of Russia, taking advantage of the American, taking advantage of Ukraine, taking advantage of Armenia, taking advantage of Greece and the European. And at the same time, his economy is falling. He's gagging the media. He's removing all the. Internally, they are in turbulence. But actually, originally, they are establishing themselves as a force to reckon with. He is still the Muslim Brotherhood top leaders in leading the Islamist Salafist in his own mindset, where he is just using Islam as a pretext. He is not a Muslim even in his own way of life, in his one way of thinking. 1991, he was lifting up his ring in his hand and he's saying, I have this Quran and this ring. Now he's among the 10 most richest person in the world. From where he got his money if he was working for the people? So I think Turkey is ambitious in its own, and they're having a project. And that's why I will always think at the end of the day, it's Turkey and Iran where they wanted to bring the conflict among these two countries. It's not Israel, Iran. It's not Iran and Saudi Arabia. It is Turkey and Iran, because that's what served the American and the European.
No, it's fascinating. Talmiz, if I can bring you in, I was also fascinated by the fact that, the way the Vladimir Putin just eliminated Prigozhin. I mean, in this air crash, So obviously, Vladimir Putin is not a man to be trifled with. And how should India tackle this US, China, Russia tussle for, the dominance over the Middle East? Where do we go with this? What is it that we can achieve? I mean, especially with the G20 coming up, what should we look at? Are we just a facilitator? What are we?
India has no strategic vision. India is overwhelmingly reactive, and its decisions are short-term and defensive and ad hoc. This has been the pattern of Indian decision-making over the last 30 or so years, and there is no change as far as decision-making is concerned. The fundamental change that has occurred in India is the commitment of our government to change the idea of India. So it's a domestic agenda. It's a domestic agenda that is ideological, and it is political because it is connected with the personality of our Prime Minister. So the personality of the Prime Minister and the ideological commitment to changing the scenario at home is the primary focus of the government. Everything else is subordinate to this. So when you ask questions like, what is India's attitude to this, what is India's attitude to this, India has no strategic vision or purpose. It simply reacts here and there. It is, as far as I can see, today, in terms of foreign affairs, number one, the management of relations with China has become a priority.
Yes.
And everything that you see happening is connected with that. The government's anxiety is to ensure that the situation at the border does not deteriorate, because the government is prioritizing the next election. It does not wish to go into the election with a weak hand as far as the border is concerned, assuming that it has a challenge. It's a different matter, number one. Therefore, you have seen there is a flurry of engagements.
Yes.
And if you see the stories that are coming out, there is a suggestion that we are nearing a possible arrangement, an interim arrangement, which will ensure that at least for the next year, the situation will not get out of control, number one. Number two, the priority is to manage relations with Russia and with China while maintaining a robust relationship with the United States. I do not believe that India can or will or plans to engage entirely with the Americans to the exclusion of other relationships. I do believe that the three buzzwords which should now enter our lexicon are number one, strategic autonomy, number two, multi-alignment, and number three, multipolarity. These are the buzzwords that have to come in, and they are the ones that are animating India. The relationship with the United States is also transactional, because we needed certain equipment from the United States. We have that equipment and we are going to use it. The steady reduction in the importance of the Indo-Pacific is very obvious, and it has been there in place for about 2 years. From the September 2021 summit, where India made it very clear that it would not wish to be associated with a security alignment that is directed solely at China. So I think Indo-Pacific and the business of Quad has already been put away. I2U2 has become a private sector platform. Though it may meet at summit level and it may meet at foreign minister level, the joint statement is very clear that they have opened the doors for the private sector to come in and invest, and it has no strategic value because there is no strategic vision. shared vision. Israel wants to be alienated from Israel is alienated from Iran, so is the United States. UAE and India are not. So there is no, it's just a catchy abbreviation, does not make for an alignment. It's going
Yeah,
nowhere. It's not
yeah,
going
yeah.
anywhere. So what I would say, and I'm going to say this very seriously, I
Mm.
really wish this ad hoc, short-term, defensive, reactive approach could be reviewed. I really wish, whether we draw on our ancient heritage, or we draw on the 19th century, or we draw on the realities of the 21st century, I'm not bothered. I want an Indian vision. I want a Indian strategy to achieve that vision. And I want to see deployment of resources, human resources, financial resources, and technological resources in order to serve the Indian interest. I am fed up with this emphasis on rhetoric and delusionary approach of what a great country we become.
Awad, if I can bring you in, final remarks, please tell me, what do you think? Do you think that we are slipping? That India itself doesn't have a handle on what it should do in the Middle East?
I think it's India, I would say, realizing it has been lacking behind and competing with the nations which have already put their foot on the ground faster than the Indian think tank and faster than the Indian decision makers. In fact, it's only relying on the soft power approach, and the American and the Israelis link to the Arab world does not serve India interest at all. What I agree with the Ambassador Talmiz is that we need to see a strong, proactive Indian role in this region, not only because it is Indo-Arab relation, it's only because also the interest of India. And as I said, interest of India stakeholder is a major stakeholder in peace and security in the region. And I think the American, even the Arab world would like to see India filling the vacuum of an American troops inside the Gulf country. And I think in time to come, if the Indian administration really thinking on those lines, I think we should see an Indian presence in this part of the world and a strategic kind of linkage between India and the Arab world. And that's India is welcomed by all means, by all the Arab countries. And I'm not exaggerating if I say so, because they have gained the respect of the Arab. And the bonds between us has been there for history, for centuries. And I think it's a time we should revive that. Take advantage of the historical bonds to make it more futuric and more of a contemporary history where India see its own position in Asia, see its own position, not aligning with any Western forces which have interest, their vested interest, because your strategic, sovereign, independence foreign policy should lean you more, keep you more lenient toward more approach to the region.
Thank you very much, Dr. Awwad, for participating in the show. Thank you very much, Talmiz Ahmad, for coming onto the show. You were both fantastic. Thank you very much, viewers, for being a part of the Global Express. Please click on the Global Express icon on the New Indian Express website. Thank you all.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Awwad. That was really, really good. Thanks,
Thank
Talmiz.
you so much.